Hi, welcome to the Webb Report. My name is Stuart Webb. Today I wanted to talk about the USAID scandal. We know this kind of stuff has been going on, but now it's being really exposed and brought to the forefront of American politics. This is Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, going over what the Trump administration has learned about the spending of the USAID department, which is the United States of America International Development or something like that. And here are the things. Here's the press secretary talking about just a few of the things that we are supposedly spending money on. Here she is. So, it's not these things, and we're going to go down a list of what has been made public now, and I'll go over and show a tweet from this reporter that shows a list of things that the federal government has been spending money on, and it's really bad. It's not just waste, fraud, and abuse. These things, if they're actually being used for what is said as being listed, um, it's not just fraud, waste, and abuse. It's wicked and evil causes. It's not just virtuous causes that were. It's not like we're there's waste, fraud, and abuse, but the causes, at least, were supposedly virtuous. These causes are totally wicked and evil and not virtuous at all. So that's one thing. But then I do agree with, to an extent, Matt Walsh's analysis, which I'm sure as other people have brought this up, is that most of what they're saying that this money's been spent on probably has not been really spent on those things. And those things are horrible, awful things, but the money is probably not being spent there. It's probably just money laundering. And so just like when Hunter Biden draws a stick figure picture and then sells it to some elite person for $500,000, that's money laundering. He's actually receiving money for something else. We just don't know exactly what that is, but we can use our imagination to figure out what that is. But it's clearly money laundering. There's not a real transfer. There's not real value in the transfer of what supposedly is being transferred, and that's where money laundering comes in, right? You are giving someone, a stick figure painting and receiving 500,000, but really under the table, behind closed doors, you're giving them something else, right? Usually nefarious and not good. So let's go over here to this guy, Mark Buffington, here on Twitter. Here's a list. This is what he said. Here's a list of 25 USAID spending items that have been highlighted in public complaints or discussions based on recent web information. $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplace and business communities. So, I mean, that's not a virtuous cause, nor should we be sending money in any way to Serbia. This is not a good use of our money, and the cause is not virtuous either. $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electrical vehicles in Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. If money was actually spent on that, I mean, this is really bad stuff. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. Again, not wicked, evil, not virtuous. These are not good causes. $2 million for sex changes obviously not good, and LGBT activism in Guatemala. See, the more you read this, the more insane it sounds, and the more wicked it sounds, and also it also sounds just like it's a mockery of us, the taxpayers, because who knows if this is even being spent in these areas or to do these things, which would in itself be terrible, but it's kind of so outrageous that it almost just seems like this is the money is, who knows where the money has gone. I mean, it's almost like a mockery. They're just giving us outrageous line items, just so that we'll focus on those line items. You know, it's almost like a diversion or a deception. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terrorist organizations even after an investigation was launched. $2 million to EcoHealth Alliance, involved in research at the Wuhan lab. Interesting. Hundreds of thousands of meals that went to Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria. Funding to print personalized contraceptives, birth control devices in developing countries. $16.8 million to support equitable outcomes in inclusion in Vietnam. $8.3 million for equity and inclusion education. Okay. $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gendered language. It doesn't get more outrageous than this. It really doesn't. This is why the government has to put a gun to my head to take my labor from me to fund who knows what, but this is the items they give us, which are ridiculous in itself. So $6.3 million to study men having sex with other men in South Africa. That's self-evident how outrageous that is. $20 million for producing an Iraqi version of Sesame Street. $520 million for ESG, which means environmental, social, and governance consultants in Africa. $45 million for DEI scholarships in Burma. $2 million for Moroccan pottery classes. $2 million promoting tourism to Lebanon. Here's another $200 million to fund irrigation for the Taliban's poppy fields. Interesting. So we're funding the drug trade that we're also trying to stop. It's like funding both sides of conflicts, both sides of wars, which we do. We currently do, and we have done in the past. Not virtuous, not good, bad. Very, very bad. It's moral hazard. It's everything about that. It's very obviously bad. Yeah, we cannot be funding both sides of conflicts. We can't be fighting the drug war while supporting and supplying the drugs and funding and growing the poppy in Afghanistan, which actually our troops protected poppy fields when we invaded and occupied Afghanistan. That was on Fox News. Okay. Just really outrageous. $50 million for condoms in Gaza. So even Gaza's not even a functioning society right now, but we're supposedly sending $50 million worth of condoms to them. Okay. Bad, wrong, not virtuous. $30 million for South African HIV/AIDS programs, criticized for and it was criticized for misuse or inefficiency. $25 million for green transportation projects in Georgia. So that's just a list that has been made public, and a lot of people that are very upset about the USAID department kind of being taken over and audited. They're very mad. Members of Congress, people that have been reliant upon this kind of money laundering, they're very upset about it because they say, well, Congress allocated this money. Well, the thing is, I highly doubt that there was a bill passed by Congress that specifically allocated all these items. I highly doubt that, right? So I believe the executive branch would have some discretion in how to use the money allocated by Congress. So, and I mean, unless you're a bad person receiving some of this money laundered cash from the U.S. from taxpayers, a good, reasonable, good human would not support any of this stuff, any of it, especially their own money being sent to or being used for these causes. But again, probably a lot of it is money laundering. But I'm glad that this is being brought up, because this has been happening for many decades, many decades. That's why we're, I believe, 36 trillion in debt. That's when I looked at the debt clock earlier today. I mean, 36 trillion, guys. We have to. There's consequences to this stuff. So I hope that we can change course. I hope and pray that we can. That we can really change the course of our nation. But it's going to take massive humility and us changing our ways. And there's going to be consequences regardless. So we cannot the chickens are going to have to come home to roost. And so we can do our best to mitigate that, but consequences are going to happen for this kind of behavior. It just is what it is. So I'll be continuing to follow this kind of government auditing, because I think it is definitely alarming, and we need to know about it. The American public needs to know about it, and someone needs to be held accountable for this stuff. So that's all I got for this one. I appreciate you listening.